I think the main thing that would have been lost for me is the ability to ask good questions. The questions that bother all of us. Like, well, wait a second, how can you say that when you also have this?
Welcome back, my dear friends, to another episode of Beyond the Book podcast. I have with me a great guest. Today's name is Rabbi Raffi Bilek. Rabbi Raffi is a rabbi, marriage counselor, family counselor, social worker for the Baltimore Therapy Center. Raffi, as I've seen, has written a few books of his own already. Before he's written he was publishing his book with Mosaic Press. His books are very interesting titles. They seem like children's books, but obviously, just from getting to see Raffi for a few minutes here, I see that. So probably not very simple books. So with great messages, the titles there on those ones are Basi Bela, The Very Special Gifts, Sisters, I Share. Are there more?
There's one more. It's Not Fair.
It's Not Fair.
Yeah.
And he's publishing a book in I would say, seems to be a totally different genre of book. This is it's called The First 10 Letters, Secrets of the Universe Hiding in Plain Sight. And we're gonna dig into all that because as I've seen and as I know, all that a person produces and creates is part of them and is shows something about them. So not that these things are separate, and we'll dig into that and unpack all that as well in a minute. You can find there's a lot. Raffi writes a lot on online. You could find his blog posts, and you can contact Raffi through fromcounselor.com.
There's a small website up for the upcoming book, thefirst10letters.com, with some info and stuff like that. We'll probably expand it as it gets published. You're gonna
write blogs for that too?
Probably not blogs. Just I got some basic info up there. Some of the famous people who I got to say nice things about me. That kind of stuff.
You got the force, or?
Just reached out, said, hey, you look at me, say, the few connections I've made in my life that I've been able to milk a little bit. So,
all right, nice. Who are those?
Who's on there? Rabbi Kelman's on there. Rabbi Mordechai Becker's on there. Rav Retman, who's a mashgiach at Chevron right now. We've got a catch there, so I'm trying to think. I can't remember off the top of my head. Everybody else is on there.
Okay, cool. All right, Raffi. Besides those name drops you just did, tell me a little bit about yourself. I know you grew up in Montreal, but we're sitting here in Baltimore.
I wouldn't say I grew up, actually.
Okay,
right.
Born and quickly moved.
Oh, right. Okay, I've been around, actually, up and down the coast. I was born in Montreal. I went to Atlanta for high school. Then I was in Providence, then Brooklyn, Jerusalem, Passaic, and here in Baltimore. So I've been around, but until the Messiah comes, I'm planning to be right here.
You're done.
Done moving.
Okay, and what brings you to Baltimore? Why was that the?
We were living in New Jersey for a while. I had some jobs there. I had some grant-funded things, and the grants went away, so the funded went away, so the position went away. So we just decided. My in-laws are in Virginia. My mom was in Annapolis at the time, and I got a brother in Silver Spring. So if we're going to put down roots, let's get somewhere a little closer to the mishpacha.
Okay, Jerusalem. What was in Jerusalem? I
went to Yeshiva. After I was in New York for a year, I decided it's time to go learn about this stuff. So I went to Yeshiva in Har Nof. I spent a couple years there and learned an awful lot.
What would you say was like your greatest takeaways from Yeshiva in Israel?
The biggest takeaway is having my Rav, Rabbi Gershenfeld, who I just think having him as a guide and having him sort of set me straight and put my head on straight was just a real bit of hashkacha and sort of really put me on the right path in life. And I'm just, it made a difference in my life.
That's amazing. You're not alone in that with Rabbi Gershonov. He's quite the Baal Eitzah, and he helps people out. A wise man.
Yeah, everything goes into who you are. I went to Brown University, which is like an uber liberal school. And I think I've become a little more conservative since those days, but I think a lot of things I learned, they became part of who I am. Being able to work with people in an emotional space and be accepting, non-judgmental to an extent.
All right, but you didn't. You started in computer science, so you weren't always a people person.
Right. Yeah, you've done your homework. Right. I did. I have a degree in computer science. It seemed like when I went to Brown, I decided I was going to go into engineering because it seemed I was good at math. It seemed like a good thing or not something. And the problem, so I did that for the first year, but they don't tell you that engineering is extraordinarily boring. So I left that. I said computer science, that might be something that's good for us and also a little bit less boring. It was definitely less boring, but it's hard with computers because even if you program them right, when they laugh at your jokes, it's just not the same. You don't get the same geschmack. So as I learned about myself, I realized I'm a people person. I did a psychology course in my last year there, and that resonated. And then the year after, I went to do this sort of Teach for America thing. It's actually a Jewish version called Avodah. And I did that in Brooklyn. I taught computers to the school of like underprivileged kids. And that sort of changed my perspective. I realized, this job where the talking to people is the job and not the part that you're doing in between doing your job was a real eye opener for me. I was like, wow, this is really a lot more what I ought to be doing. So after that, I went to Yeshiva. And then with Rabbi Gershfeld's urging, I went to get a master's degree in something, which turned out to be social work, largely because it was sort of quick and dirty. And I did not want to spend another, 8 years in school doing a psychiatry degree or something like that.
And that's worked.
It's worked fantastic. It was a great decision. It worked out very well. Social work degree gave me a lot of flexibility. And now I'm at a place where I'm running my own thing. So it's just been great for me.
Cool. What do you think? Do you think you use any of your skills or any of your skills from computer sciences? Do you think that helps you as a social worker?
It helps me when I have to relate to people who are techies, and when I can sort of throw out that degree, they'll listen to me a little bit more. I really do like programming. I like the way you think with it. I don't get an awful lot of use out of that in day-to-day life. One day I hope to sort of get back into programming, just make my own little things. I used to program little programs that would help me get my tasks done. Now a lot of it's automated anyways, but it's a skill that I like and appreciate. It's it's in there for use in the future.
Right. It doesn't help you with like social media at all. So that's
oh no, yeah, no. I mean, when I learned this, it was just as social media was beginning to come out. So I'm actually really not very literate with Facebook and Twitter and all this social media's out there. And the truth is, it's better because a few times I've been on there, it's pretty horrifying to me.
Yeah, it's also a hole, but you get sucked in there. But in terms of like your practice, have you transitioned at all into the internet world?
I mean, yeah, I'm totally comfortable with the internet. I've done a lot of, during the pandemic year, I did a lot of work on Zoom. And I have a blog, a professional blog besides From Counselor. I also run Baltimore Therapy Center.com. Check me out online. So I have a blog there as well. And that's, it draws in a lot of people who are just Googling like, hey, I need help now. I need marriage. I come up. So that's been helpful. I learned a little bit about SEO, search engine optimization, which has helped me get found. So it's definitely been a bonus to be, comfortable and familiar with the internet world. And I use social media a little bit just to, I have a page on Facebook so people find me, but it's good to keep it at arm's length. I really don't want to get sucked into that. I'm on like one group for therapists in the Baltimore, D.C. area. And that's pretty horrifying, the way that they speak and treat each other and talk to each other. It's like they can be pretty judgmental and nasty, which is funny because you would think and hope they wouldn't be.
A group of therapists, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's this very, the whole field is very liberal. And so people who don't fit that box don't survive very well. So I don't say a lot on that group. I keep my mouth shut, but, put out there for referrals and things.
Yeah, it's super helpful. Facebook groups. How do you think, like you mentioned, that the therapist world is very liberal? I saw that, one of your websites is geared clearly towards Jews. I don't know if anybody else would know it from Counselor means. And,
I've not gotten a lot of non-Jews going there, although I get a lot of spam there with interesting comments. But yeah.
Interesting. And then your Baltimore Therapy Center is not specifically geared towards Jews?
No, that's just for the general public. And a lot of people find me on Google. I think, in the frum community, people who are looking for a therapist or for marriage counseling, certainly, they go to the Rav, they go to a friend, whatever. They're not really Googling as much. Sometimes it happens. But, for your general person out there who does not have a huge, a base in their community, they turn to Google. That's what we all do nowadays. You need something, go to Google. So I, work a lot on just getting on Google on the first page so that people find me and Baruch Hashem.
It's a great name, From Counselor. I'm sure you don't just get from Baltimore. That's like
I get people do contact me from all over the place. As far as Australia and New Zealand, and people call me from there. It's been cool. Right, From Counselor. Again, I did some SEO work there. I work on it less just because there's only so much you can do. But I put some posts up there from time to time, which of interest to people.
Right. How do you think that your patients from that are specifically looking for a From Counselor or therapist, how do you think that differs from like your work with just the general public?
I mean, it's nice to work with From people and for From people to work with a From therapist. I don't think that a From person always has to have a From therapist. I think all things being equal, it's better to have one. But all things are not equal. Sometimes, the best, eating disorder therapist in your area is not a From person. If you have eating disorder, you should do that and not go to the From guy who's like, oh yeah, I've heard of eating disorders. Like that's not, people who are looking for someone who understands their background, their world, whatever, I think it really helps a lot to be able to relate in that way, for me to relate to them, for them to relate to me. So I don't think it's critical, but I think, when someone wants to, bare their soul to someone, to have someone from within the same, group is comforting.
Cool. That's a good point. So let's jump into your writing a little bit, your books. So I guess your first set of books, which they weren't a set, they were written over a bunch of years, it looks like.
Right.
So your first set of, I'll call them a set for my sake.
Now it's a set.
Now it's a set. On Amazon, it looks like a set. So that's
okay.
So that first set of book, which is a set of children's books, tell me about the experience of like writing that, who it's for, what's like.
Yeah, it's funny. It's interesting. When I wrote them, it was not at all like, oh, I'm going to write a children's book. I'm a social worker, like emotionally connected. I realized there was this issue with my kids. I think the first one was bossy Bela, right? So when we had a second child, the first one took the older child role and became kind of bossy and, pushed her around, things like that. When did I write it? I can't remember. She was 3 or 5 or something. And what doesn't work with children is you shouldn't be bossy or don't treat your sister that way. Those are things that don't work. What does work is stories. And so I wrote a story, and I think I just like asked some friends around. Like I found some from girl, like a high school girl who liked to draw, and I said, "Hey, would you do this project for me?" I think I paid her like $30 or something. Just some base. She drew some pictures. I gave somebody. It was like great. And I put together this book, and this was well into the era of self-publishing. So I just you upload a PDF, got a cover, and there you have it. And I ordered it, and I just read it home to my daughter, and I just kind of read it over and over a couple times, and without preach or anything, just read the story, and like my daughter treated it as a story, and it probably went in, whatever. She's still a firstborn, and so that comes with certain aspects to it. But I think it helped. Like we saw that it things shifted over time. So it worked. And so then I was like, well, this is great. So next time, basically the books are a catalog of my family social issues, basically. Right? So whenever there was an issue, like, I should write a book about this. Do I remember what the second one was? I think it might have been I Share, right? For when, it was probably the second one. It must have been, I guess, 2 or 3 or something. When sharing becomes an issue, it's not really a realistic capacity for kids at like 1 or 2 years old. But as they get a little older, you want to instill in them that value. And rather than saying, oh, you should share your toys, or don't we like to share our toys, or be a mitzvah girl and share your, those are all nice, you should say things, but, stories. So I just wrote it up and put together the story, which is very, very basic. And I was it the same girl who did, I can't remember if I got the same girl to draw or not. And that was it. I got on the computer, put some pages together, make a PDF, send it in, and you have a book and you read it. And I think that one was well liked by all my kids at the right age. It's very simple, nice drawings. So over time, whenever there was an issue, I would write up a story rather than trying to preach or lecture. And so I had these books. I think I can't remember who it was, but probably my mom, who's a big fan of mine, obviously, right? They told me you should sell these, you should get these out. And I think other people also said, maybe like a friend of mine was like talking about them or saw them at my house. I don't know. So basically I got this idea. Someone suggested, hey, why don't you put them out? Like, eventually, whatever. But so it wasn't so hard. Eventually I just put them up on Amazon, and that's it. Now they're available to the public, right? They get bought a little bit. I don't track it very much. And I don't push or advertise because that wasn't the point, that I don't have time anyways. But I think they're great. I think they're really helpful for people facing those issues. My favorite one is the last one I published, which was The Very Special Gift, which is about tznius. And that, I think, more than anything, when my oldest daughter started asking these questions about it, she was probably about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9. No, it's got to have been earlier than that. When you start asking questions about it, again, it's very hard to convey this in a way that doesn't seem heavy-handed to children. Older people.
To anybody.
Yeah, right. Well, to adults,
Yeah.
To adults, you can talk in a way that talks about spirituality and deeper things, and maybe they can hear that, maybe not. But to a kid, you can't. And so I just came up with this metaphor, of this girl who has a diamond. It's a very special diamond. She keeps it private. What happens when she doesn't keep it private? She shares it with people, and it just becomes not so special anymore. It's just like, without really touching the issue directly about why it's important to cover our body or anything. I mentioned at the back and talk about how our body is a diamond from Hashem and all these things. And I think that one is really a powerful one. And I would like to get out more. Again, I don't really have any channels to do that. Maybe after I become a famous author with this new one, maybe I'll be able to get
or from
that
the
one.
podcast.
Right. Yes, absolutely. I mean, if people want it from there. I did have one person actually buy the I Share. It was I Share. Some random person bought on Amazon and put this comment of it wasn't so good because she thought it was a Jewish book, and she was like, "Oh, what's this Hashem thing in there?" So after that, I changed the Amazon description for Jewish girls, whatever. I don't want to be fooling people into buying these books for who it's helpful for. So yeah, I think anybody at their stage, it could be very useful for whatever they're going through, and the tznius book especially, I think, could be really helpful for a lot of people. Just because, how do you explain it to girls who are growing into this and just getting used to it? And having a metaphor and a story to work with, I think would be great. So I would definitely love to get them out more.
Right, that's awesome. The ability to translate your messages and your urge to lecture, but to channel that into a story and into a message, also shows that you understand how people and kids understand things.
We're all like that. I mean, you think about reading a book or a Torah or whatever. It's the stories that we're a story, great. Shlomo Zalman said, oh yeah, that's great. And they stick with us. They're memorable. So, we all like to think that we're grown-ups and we like to get into the Torah and deep thoughts. And that's true for some people, but most of us, a story really hits us in a stronger way. And certainly for kids, you can't, giving lessons is important. It's it's the concept of planting and building from Rav Wolbe, right? Building is, you should do this. And then planting is hey, look at this story. Right? You tell a story without I need you to behave like this. I have a book. Let's read this book. It's a nice book. And it goes in over time and it grows.
Right. I always have this discussion if Uncle Maishi and his ability to translate messages into songs, but it's also stories in essence.
Right.
Is he one of the, my chinuch, I grew up on that. And those stories, and the idea is the songs. And the same is true with, Rottenberg and Marvelous Music Machine and those journeys, the messages they get through with music and a song. Gosh, that's and the story and music that just drills it home. And is that one of the greatest teachers in the Jewish nation and Klal Yisrael today? But I think that you said that you need both. You need the planting and the building. That was Wolbe, but you need both, because just songs or just stories then just become stories, and if it's reinforced by seeing their parents share or seeing their parents do the right thing, then it's
right. I mean, those are more planting activities. When I do those things, then it goes in subtly. The building part is that you teach them this is the halacha about sharing, or this is how we treat our brothers in this family, and those are important. Setting boundaries, setting rules, making sure that it's clear. But that's not enough to grow an organic person. There's the planting part where they have to grow on their own.
We were just, I was listening on the way to a store with my son yesterday, and we were listening to that Marvelous Music Machine, Tati, we want more, right? The kids go to the store and they want more and more. And my son was in the store and he goes, Daddy, I want something, but I don't want more and more. I just want something.
Yeah,
so then it gets in and it sticks. That's
a
super important. And also to treat ourselves like that. I think that I learned a lot when I read my kids' books, no matter what it is. And are there any, I guess for you, are there any Jewish books today that children's books that you look at, you're get inspired from as well?
I think Bracha Getz has a lot of really great message books out there. And, she did one with Rabbi Yaakov Horowitz, Let's Stay Safe, which I think is great because I used to work a lot in child abuse prevention.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so I'm big on that. And again, it's very hard to talk to kids about that without being scary or heavy-handed, but just having a story. Again, just story, rhymes, pictures, great.
We read that all the time, and smack in the middle, there's about 3-4 pages there with like some nice sensitive where he addresses sensitive issues of just keeping your body safe and keeping your body private, and it's in this bigger picture of just staying safe and safety, and kids get it. It's
right.
part of that.
It goes in.
Very, very well done, that book, I would say too. Okay, so are there more coming? That's the...
my oldest is now a teenager. I think she'd probably be on picture books. Right. I don't know that picture books will help. The youngest one still maybe. You never know. If an issue comes up, maybe I will. It's a little bit time consuming, so it's not immediately on the horizon. But you never know. I wasn't planning on any of those either. It's just like that, happened.
What would you like to see? Like I know it's beaten it, but like for kids, like what would you like to see more of in kids' books? Jewish and not Jewish, even not Jewish books, like secular books we'll call them. But what would you like to see the messages they give over to kids at the young age?
It's hard. I picked up some books on empathy for kids I've seen around because I think that's a really important thing to instill. I'm not thrilled about how they've done it. Many of them are still a little bit too direct. So I don't know, maybe, social awareness books and empathy and meals books like that don't, sort of strike the wire directly, but like, telling stories and things and asking questions at the end maybe, but like just, trying to instill those values in a much less direct way, because I think that's what works best.
So the less direct it's a balance.
It's a balance. You can't sort of like totally hide it there in the story and like not bring it up all. But when you talk about like, don't you think you should be like this too? I think it breaks the sort of the fourth wall. And so striking a balance between a story and a lecture, I think would be great.
Cool. It's hard when you get out there and you start looking, like go to the bookstore and you just pick them up. It's also scary to know what other things they're sort of the subliminal messages they're also putting in. TV is the same way, even kids stuff today. It's hard to know. Yeah,
the secular kid stuff today is a little bit, it's getting dangerous because they're sort of with the openness of society these days, they're sort of very subtly putting in like everything's okay and everybody's okay and all these things. And for my kids, I really want to teach them, they should be respectful of everybody, respectful of how you do what you do, and just to care about other people without saying that like, oh, okay, we can just do anything and everything's okay. I don't want to, that's again a balance to strike with kids, and it's getting harder as society sort of takes on more and more things as being just the norm.
And then so now you're transitioning into even like a Kabbalah book, so it's like skipping lots of steps here.
Well, right. Well, actually, there's a lot of Kabbalah in the kids' books. You just have to know where to look, right? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if it's. I mean, look.
How do you see? Well, explain to us this book, your new book, the First 10 Letters, and how you came to it, and then we'll compare and contrast it to sort of your other work, your stuff.
Yeah. It's funny. The First 10 Letters is also written as a story. It's in dialogue form. And again, stories capture us
like a kuzari.
Yeah, it's similar to that, right? Stories capture us. They keep our attention, and so I debated that at first because I have a lot of material I wanted to share. I was like, oh, let me just dive in and start sharing it. And I thought, you know what? It might be better in this question and answer format. Also because I came to these ideas through my own exploration, my own questioning. And so there are a lot of kashas I had on myself. And to be able to have a foil to ask those questions, I thought was really helpful.
So what's the format? You're asking them to yourself? You're asking them
it's a student and a professor who happen to run into each other on the airport, and they have a discussion through their trip. And so the professor, who's like a frum professor, is a frum linguistics professor. That's the thing. So he has all the answers, and then the student, who's kind of like not so initiated, like has great questions and kashas and responses, and it's both sides of me asking and answering together, and they put it into the book. And I think it's a good format to get out the ideas that need to be gotten out there. I don't remember how I got into this. I found it fascinating from the beginning of my studies, whenever I heard these ideas about the letters, I thought it was fascinating because to me the most powerful part of Torah learning of Frumkeit is when you see it's true with your own eyes. If I have to buy into some kind of premise you're giving me, it's like, okay, I trust you, and so what you're saying, I'll go along with it. well, if you can show me that, like, oh, when it's this over here and over here and over here and over here, and it's all consistent, right? And then you can tie it into what I see with my own eyes. Like, the world is a certain way, right? The trees are made of this, and like all the different aspects of reality. So that is very compelling to me. I don't need to believe you at all. You pointed out to me, like, wow, I can make the connection myself. Like, this is clearly consistent, and consistency, rings with truth. With the olive base, with the letters, that happens all the time. There are things where you can see that it's consistent and it ties in, and across the shape and the number and the name of the letter, and then you tie that into reality, right? And it's consistent. I find that very powerful. So, since I started, learning Torah study stuff, it struck me, and I kept those in my pocket. And then one day, how did I even get it? I don't remember how I got there, but I decided to put together some information. I had some shiurim that I was giving about it in my yeshiva. And I moved to Baltimore eventually. I spoke to a Kier organization here and offered to do some shiurim for them. That never panned out. And I was like, you know what? I got to get this out here. So I started writing a book. I mean, this is many years in the making of this book. So I started writing it 4 years, 5 years. I don't know. I mean, the ideas were been around for a while, and I started writing it. And I figured this is a way to get it out without having to go give a shiur over and over and over again. So like Sunday mornings, I would spend an hour writing. It was like, over a lot of time, it came together. And it's only the first 10 letters, largely because I don't have a great worked out shita for the other 12. I have some ideas about them, but I didn't want to put out an idea of like cute vorsh. Like these other books on the letters, like, oh, hey, it's Moshe Rabbeinu, and it's this and that. Like, it's great. I mean, they're true and they're good ideas and they're beautiful, but it's like the scattering of ideas of what the letter could mean. And that's not my deal. My deal is, so in this book, you have the first 10 letters, and it sequentially brings out all the fundamentals of Yiddishkeit. It's like, that we talk about, Yichud Hashem and Bechira and all these things, and the fundamentals come out sequentially. So it's really an integrated whole, which again speaks to me of the consistency of, the teachings, the ideas, which I think to me is very big. And so, I have what I have. One day, hopefully, I'll be able to really sit and think through deeply all the other letters and come up with, explain how they are another integrated unit. But so since I didn't have that, and since the book is already pretty big, I didn't want to, wait for that. Also, it would take me another, who knows how many years. So here we go. Here I have this book, which I think just brings out these ideas with consistency, with truth, with impact, and I'm pretty excited about it. Cool,
but it's also some sort of pattern once you get past 10, once you get past Yud.
Ostensibly, right, the tens will reflect also on the ones. So meaning, I've sort of been thinking about Kaf lately, just throwing some ideas around my head. Ostensibly, that will reflect some of base as well, but it's going to have its own ideas. Otherwise, it would just be base. So there's got to be more in there. Again, I have some ideas. I don't have a full lesson for that yet. I have pieces of the puzzle, and I enjoy putting the pieces together. When I was in yeshiva, I had a lot of time to think about these things. And now that I'm grown up and I have, 4 kids and a mortgage, so less time to think about those things. So it comes when it comes.
Cool. And what does your student in your story walk away with? Like, what is he's inspired. It's proven to him. I
didn't end it with him saying like, okay, pass the Kool-Aid. It was more like, wow, this is powerful. I got to think about this. And that's sort of where I left it. I mean, this to me is very powerful. And to me, it is very, for me, it's a proof that this is all true. And like, it's just hard for me to conceive that all of these things are coincidences that somehow work out, so that was very powerful to me as I was growing in Yiddishkeit, that like, wow, this is something real. And I think Jake is the student, he walks away with a sense of like, wow, this is something real here.
And seeing that for you personally in your personal journey, like seeing that in the letters specifically, was it letters or just patterns that repeat themselves, and seeing it again in another place is within it, or is it the letters?
I mean, the letters speak to me. I like Scrabble a lot. I like, the linguistics and letters and language is really interesting to me. And so, partially because that's a part of it, and partially because there's just a lot of patterns, consistency. There's reality to this. There's reality. It's not just, let me give you this, some people really, really resonate with Kabbalah. There's some Kabbalistic ideas in here. I am not a Kabbalist, right? I am not even like near the level where I could be in to think about maybe someone calling myself a Kabbalist. I don't even, but something like, oh, the sphere of this, and the sphere of, and they're talking about these ideas in the sky, but like, where Netzach and Hod play in your lives. Okay, maybe you'll have these books like, oh, Netzach, you should think about it. Like, it's borrowing concepts and using them in our world. And that doesn't speak to me. Like, it's beautiful. It's true. It's real. It's good for people. For me, it's like, okay, let me tell you what aleph means. The word aleph has a certain meaning, and you see it reflected in this. I don't need you to believe me on anything. I'm just going to lay it out. You know, you may have some kashas here or there, but like, it's just there's a bunch of facts that all fit together. So to me, it's a very compelling thing. It's real to me. You know, the name, the number, and then something in my life that applies to that, like oneness. I know what the number one is. I know what it means to be unique. And to see that play together, like, oh, okay, great. I can connect to that, as opposed to like, oh, you know, what is Yesod? We talk about Yesod, but like, oh, it's this idea. Like, we'll connect it to something that I can actually relate to. And I just find that very powerful.
It's like, right, very practical and relatable.
Yeah.
What do you have to cut out from it? They're doing it in this format of a question answer. I know that, like, in terms of what we mentioned, like the Kuzari, like it's been rewritten without the question answer. I think Nasil Sharma originally was written.
Dialogue, yeah.
Was dialogue and then rewritten, and it's when you read the dialogue from it, it seems to be like cut out a little bit. It's
I mean, I believe
do you feel like you had to do that?
I think the main thing that would have been lost for me is the ability to ask good questions. You know, the questions that bother all of us. Like, well, wait a second, how can you say that when you also have this, right? So this format really allows a space to ask the question straight out without having to answer the question in this backwards way and hope that it doesn't come up. You know, the reader may have some of those questions themselves. I have those questions that I work through. And so being able to just put the question out there, I think is being real about potential weaknesses and arguments, and being able to respond to them effectively.
Cool. Yeah, this, I wish more people would be telling stories and telling, you know, using that kind of idea that they're trying to get an idea into people, not just putting an idea out there. I'm just trying to have it resonate and write it in the format that could do that. That's.
I had a debate with myself at the beginning. On one hand, I think it's relatable in this way and people can get into it. On the other hand, I imagine that some serious students will look and like poo-poo it a little bit, like, oh, it's the storybook, whatever. I think there are a lot of deep and useful ideas in there and interesting ideas. And I wrote it so that it would be accessible from the most beginning person to, you know, someone with a lot of Yeshiva background. I contend that there will be new and useful things in here for everybody on every level. I can imagine that some people may look at it as a story and brush it off, but hopefully, you know, it'll hit enough people that it'll make an impact. Probably the same people do that to the Torah. I mean, the whole Bereshis is a story, and as soon as you start digging, it's really not a story, but the story allows it to continue, allows it to get into you. Right, that's right. The Hashem does not say, okay, you should have lots of chesed, you should do good things. It tells stories and gives people to emulate. Yeah.
That's super important. How do you use this kind of creativity in your practice as well? If we've seen like being able to take this and translate it to children's books, now translate it into a very like a fascinating way of relaying pretty deep concepts, very deep concepts of the Aleph base. So like, do you use this kind of creativity, or what kind of creative ways do you get to or do you express that creativity with your clients?
So I think the way that it comes out,
I don't know if you'd be able to say, oh, well, this is creative, but like,
well, I'll tell you the way that what's going to my mind is that I use a lot of metaphors and analogies with my clients because, again, I think those make concepts relatable, and you know, problems become sort of clear when you can envision it in that way. And I find that very helpful. I think clients find it helpful also, and we can find a shared metaphor to discuss what's going on in their life or in their relationship and be able to relate to it in that way. I actually just put out an article which was published last week, the new social worker about talking about how therapy is really a lot like archaeology. And I think I've gotten some good feedback from that because it doesn't seem like an immediately clear comparison, as I can tell by your furrowed brows. It's like, what are you talking about? So I think it's actually quite a remarkable fit in terms of how when you're doing therapy with somebody who doesn't like, it's one thing it's like, hey, I need to lose weight and I do this, but like when you're going deeper into someone's life, like we don't really know necessarily what we're going to find. We know, okay, here's an excavation site. Here's our client. And there's stuff in there. I know there's stuff in there. I don't know how deep it is. I don't know exactly what I'm going to find. I have some sense we're looking for like, you know, some old coins or something. So you dig. And for a while you don't really find anything. All of a sudden, like junk, you hit something like, oh, something's here. Let's look at that. And they're like, oh, this could be delicate. Let's brush it off a little gently. Like, let's not talk about the subject too directly. Like, let's understand what's going around the subject for you. Like, there's a shiny thing here. Like, it could be something. Oh, no, turns out that was an old can. Never mind. That was not a big deal. Let's keep going. Like, oh, I found the corner of something here. Let's explore more. Oh, wow, there's a really big thing here for you. Let's understand it. And so I wrote that about the opening of that article is about how people sometimes ask, so how many sessions is this going to take? Right? I mean, the answer for me is, I have no idea. I don't know who you are. I don't know anything about it. But I use this metaphor to explain, like, look, we don't really know what we're going to find. Don't know what's down there. Don't know how long it's going to take. Pretty sure there's something to find in here. We can find it, clear off the dirt, take a good look at it, and then, show it to the light of day, and then we can understand better what we're looking at, and that'll help us make decisions about the future. But what's in there? I don't know. Let's find out.
Right. I think that analogy helps both the client, meaning both the patient or client, and the therapist. It's a sensitive issue, and you don't know what's in there.
Right.
We ourselves, we know we can't do X. Not as a therapist, but as a client, we know I have a block towards something. Maybe that's a really big deal. Maybe it's not really a big deal, and it just needs a little push over the hump. But maybe there's something there, and to treat it like that, that's a great analogy. Do you ever find yourself getting caught in like the analogy where the client will be like I know their analogy or muscle snobs, that they needs to work out perfectly, and how perfect do you work to make it?
It's interesting. Some of them work out really great. The archaeology analogy really works out great. The problem is when you have like a muscle snob, it's like, yeah, but where's your shovel?
Right. It's not hot. It's hot in the archaeology site. It's not hot in the office.
Right. I have never had anybody challenge me on that. I do sometimes acknowledge, when the analogy ends its usefulness. But often you can extend a good analogy. You can extend pretty far. And it helps us understand, like, when you say the next thing, oh, you know what? It's also like this part of the analogy, and it helps them understand themselves a bit better and why they're stuck and why things are going. So, I've never had anybody really get stuck on that. I'm happy to acknowledge the limitations of an analogy. It's always just an analogy. If it was the same thing, it would be the same thing. You wouldn't need an analogy,
Right. But again, it's so cool. It speaks to your, like this, the same thing you were saying with the Aleph Beis, seeing the patterns and being proven again is what the analogy helps you is you see the pattern of the truth in this story is the same as this story. And there's a truth there. Now, all the things, the details may be different, but there is a pattern there. And you see that truth playing out again and again and again.
Right.
And that's cool. You think like you have a box where you have like the muscle box, or you just come up with these on the spot? So
I have some that I use repeatedly, and then sometimes I come up with them on the spot, depending what they're telling me. Yeah.
Cool. All right. This was awesome. And thank you very much for joining us. Is there anything else you want listeners or want people to know about your book and about your books, about you?
Boy, I could talk about myself all day long. No, I'm pretty excited for the first 10 letters to come out. That should be hopefully by the end of the year. Children's books, are they are where they are, and maybe one day in the future more is coming. I don't know. Who knows what projects are next? Depends what Hashem puts into my brain and what time I have to do it with.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.